for your warm-up today. Decided to make it a little heavy, and we had a nice couple of days weather-wise. I know it's gonna go up a little bit, but it's also not gonna be too bad. So now the weather's getting cooler overall. What fall or winter things are you guys looking forward to? Now, mine is more food-related, and I am excited about soup. I know that sounds like a weird thing to be excited about, but I love different types of soup. So I'm actually very excited that that's happening. I love hot drinks and stuff like that. I mean, I drink coffee every morning, but I don't know, like I don't want to drink like a hot drink like at 3 o'clock in the middle of the day. Whereas when it's colder, it's it's kind of nice, nice change of pace. So maybe yours is more like of an event. Maybe you're excited about snow if we ever get snow again in California. But seems like all we get is just trees on fire.
Love to see it.
Apocalyptic wasteland of the state that we live in now. While you guys are finishing up your warm-up, I'm going to play Apache Notes while you guys do that. Then we'll see what you guys said.
Good morning, Center High School. My name is Julian. And I'm Daniel. And this is your Apache Notes for September 29th, 2021. Juniors, please purchase your homecoming t-shirts for $20 in the Student Center. Final day to purchase them is Thursday, September 30th.
Attention students, today is the last day to apply for CSF. If you wish to be a member, please join CSF online at Sandra CSF for more information, including access to the application. Freshmen cannot apply until their second semester.
Sanger High School students in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. Sanger High School will be offering the ASBAB assessment for those interested in joining the military or for those who would like to take the assessment as a career exploration tool. The assessment will be offered on November 15th, 2021. If you are interested in taking this assessment, please sign up with Mr. Palomo in the guidance office ASAP.
Spanish Honor Society applications are available in room 1202. The deadline is today. If you have any questions, talk to Senora Robles. And these were your Apache Notes for September 29th, 2021.
Have a great day, Sanger High.
Okay. All right, well, that was thrilling. So let's go back to this. Okay, let me also take attendance. That'd be good too if I need to do this here and if not. So. Are you ready? Okay. Is your iPad like almost dead or something?
Yeah, it's up.
Okay. So Madison, you're obviously good too. Okay. Okay. Just a couple of people, not too bad. All right, Ebony, would you put for yours?
I said that I'm mostly excited about the soup too, and the warm blankets, and watching movies.
So funny thing, my daughter she's like obsessed with blankets also, like, and she'll wear them though like in summer too though, so that doesn't stop her. She just wears more blankets during winter. What kind of suit though?
Albóndigas?
Okay, that's good stuff. So I also like I've told you guys I cook a lot, but I make a lot of soups. I make like French onion soup. I make my own like chicken noodle soup. I make a poblano corn chowder is pretty good. But anyways, so yeah, no, good stuff. Also, there's also like certain dishes like that like you make that like aren't like super like summery like when you make pot roast or something like that, you know, that's like I wouldn't make that when it's like 110 out either. So they're just like it's just nice to like have different things again. But all right, let's see what else did we get. Oh yeah, Gianna. Sorry.
I said I'm looking forward to Christmas because I like Christmas movies. And also my birthday is during winter break.
That kind of sucks though, because it's like you're right next to Christmas, so it's like people will probably skimp you on the gifts and stuff. So you know, just get a twofer kind of gift kind of thing. But favorite Christmas movie?
The Santa Claus movie.
Okay. I don't know, like if I have a favorite Christmas movie. My family likes Christmas movies. I don't like them that much. I really like decorating for Christmas and stuff like that. We kind of go all out. Thank you. We actually have we just moved recently actually, and we have like 25 bins of Christmas. So yeah, it's kind of intense, but yeah.
Is it Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Okay, there you go. That's my favorite Christmas movie. Thank you. Thank you for finding something. So yeah, Die Hard would be my favorite Christmas movie. In fact, my dad and I, it was like 2 years ago. It was like, before COVID, pre-COVID, 2019. My dad and I actually went to, I think it was the Tulare movie theaters, and they were showing Die Hard like during Christmas. It was pretty awesome. So yes, that would be it. Madison, what'd you put?
I'm looking forward to Christmas Tree Lane and just the colder weather in general. I don't like the summer.
Gotcha.
And I'm also excited for Halloween and all the decorations.
Yes, I'm looking forward to Halloween too. We actually do a lot for Halloween also, not as much. And I actually like decorating for Halloween better because for one thing, I'm kind of clumsy and Christmas stuff is a lot more delicate. So I'm always nervous that I'm going to break it. So Halloween, everything's like made of plastic or rubber or whatever. And it's like, I don't feel like I'm going to destroy everything. Like it's cool enough time to shop. So yeah. Anybody else want to volunteer anything? Yeah, go for it. And then I'll get you
Just mostly just waking up busy mornings and watching football mornings.
Yeah, it does. It feels a lot different. Even though it's on right now, it always feels different when it's like cold weather outside and it feels like actual football season. Yeah, and also I wasn't here on Tuesday, so yes, for all you like Cowboys fans and non-Eagle fans, yes, I was very sad that my Eagles sucked, but it is what it is. Nathan.
For Halloween, the new movie, I'm camping for that, and I'm thinking about going to see System of a Down when they come to President.
I actually very much like System of a Down. I do not like Korn though, so that was like the deal breaker for me. I don't like them. I find them very lame. I know they're my favorite.
No, you're tripping. It's over.
Okay, well, I could be tripping, but that's fine. System of a Down's super cool though. I like them, but anyways, that's beside the point. Okay, so yeah, somebody did ask me about what the final draft was. I'm sure some of you might have seen that, especially if you have your notifications on. If you don't, shame on you. Okay, so I graded all of the final draft last night. I didn't leave any comments because I saw a lot of the same issues that I want to address as a class because there was a lot and I don't feel like typing the same thing 100 times, so call me crazy. I don't feel like copying and pasting is necessarily going to be super helpful, so I'm just going to go over it as a class and make sure that we all get it. So this is somebody's brief, right? So this one is one that I would say needed a little bit of work. There's a lot of grammar issues in it, but that's not really what I'm focused on so much. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna read it off my screen so I can read it a little bit better. Let me get there. All right, the story version of Tone of 2081 is more about the restrictions on how everyone is equal. The tone of the story is more restricted because everyone had to wear birdshot bag over their head and the shockwave that makes you a star remember what you were thinking about. Okay, so obviously it was kind of hard to read. The grammar was kind of messed up in there, but the problem with that first sentence, besides the grammar, is it's not telling me anything about the difference of tone between the movie and the story. What was the tone of 2081, the movie? What was the tone of the story? That's all that needed to be really said in that first sentence. It just needed to be a little bit more clear. And they didn't even mention the story really. It said the story version of Tone of 2081. So again, just saying pick one tone word for the story, one tone word for the movie. Okay, so that's the first sentence. The tone of the story is more, I already read that, my bad. 2081 is more added to the story of Bergeron because it added one more detail to the story by saying he had a bomb under the cedar even though he got out of jail. So just remember that was supposed to be kind of tell me what the story was about at that part. So I gave you all a sample of what like the Bergeron brief, right? Kind of like what I was expecting. But for the summary, it's like Harrison Bergeron is about a society where people are too focused on how equal things are and are putting handicaps on others to prevent them from being special or more superior to one another. That's the summary, okay? Now, what is wrong with this quote here? What should they have started it off with?
By the introduction clause?
Well, they're starting off the sentence with a direct quote. What have I told you guys not to do?
Not start off.
Not do that, so what should they have started with?
Their own
Big
words.
transition.
Their own words, or what did you say?
Like transition.
Not a transition, it's kind of like a transition, but it's what we call an introductory clause, and it's introducing what's happening in that quote. So where it says the year was 2081 and everybody was finally equal, I would have said the story opens with a narrator explaining how in the future society that it is now the year 2081 and everybody was equal. So again, I would have probably cut this first part of that sentence out and just done it in my own words and then started the direct quote where it says, and everybody was finally equal. So you always want to start off with your own words. The reason why I always tell students to start with their own words is because it gives you more agency, which basically means it gives you more ownership of what you're trying to say. If you start off with someone else's quotes, you're basically saying, I'm not important or my thoughts aren't as important as this person's. You should have the most important thoughts on the paper and not the other people. You're using them to help you, but they're not the important part. Your thoughts are the most important. Okay, after the quote, this is the part that I really want us to focus on, is the analysis. So most people, I would say at least half, if not more, focus on what the characters did. They focus on, like, Harrison Bergeron felt depression. He felt sad. He felt angry. Remember, tone isn't how the characters feel, right? That would be characterization. Characterization is where you talk about the description of the characters, their personality, their feelings, whatever. Tone is where you talk about how did the director make the reader feel, basically. If they created a sense of aggression in the text, then you would look for words that were aggressive. Okay, so you would look for words that like had more violence in them and talk about how those words were violent. If it was depression, what words made you sad from it? So specifically, especially with the story, you need to look at the quotes. Somebody had a pretty good one for the year 2080, the 2081 one. And they talked about how it was finally equal. And they talked about how the word finally was almost like sarcastic. And how it was like talking about how it was basically like, oh, it's finally equal. And then by the end of it, we see how it being equal is a problem. So obviously the author was being sarcastic about what he meant. So it had a sarcastic tone. So I thought that was really good. This one, and don't worry, this one's not from this class. But it says, this is talking about how they put restrictions on almost everyone because they don't want the smart civilians to stand out from the less intelligent people so they won't be jealous. That's literally just summarizing the story. That's just telling me what the reason why the society wanted to have the handicaps. It's not saying anything about tone. So again, this person lost some points because of that analysis because they stopped talking about tone. They just told me what happened in the story. Also, if they wanted to make everyone equal, they would have made them not wear the birdshot bag because they basically singling out the smartest people. I mean, that's a good point about like why it was not a good idea to use the handicap. So it was good. And can I just say too, even though I'm kind of like going on about like what we need to do better, I was actually showing some of your guys' brief rights because we had our late start meeting this morning. All the other World Lit teachers, we were kind of looking at each other's essays. The one thing that they said about your guys' writing, and they looked at multiple, is that your writing was actually way better than their classes. So like the actual writing itself is good. Like you guys, like I'm very impressed with like your guys' sentence structure for the most part. Your actual like writing style is good. We just need to kind of be a little bit more focused what we're talking about, like just staying on track a little bit more. And I'm like super confident that we're gonna get there because you guys have the skills to do this. We just need to be a little bit more like polished with it. So that's what I'm hopefully gonna help you guys with. All right. All right, so again, we just go on, they're still talking about the short story. The movie version of Harrison Bergeron doesn't really follow the script of the story. There's a couple of added scenes to make the story version a little more interesting to watch. So just again, not talking about tone, not staying on track. Now this one, next one, it's a little, for whatever reason, it's not cut off on my screen, but it is up here a little. Oh, it actually isn't anymore. Awesome. Okay. All right. In the story, Harrison shouts, and this one was really long. So some of you guys your writing was really long, and I'm sure a lot of you think that, oh, if I write a lot, I'm guaranteed an A. Now, a couple of you who did write a lot did happen to get A's, but there are some people who wrote a lot, they got B. So it's not always a guarantee. It's what you write about that's going to get you the good grade. In the story, Harrison shouts and flails his hands. I skipped the topic sentence. I skipped the conclusion just because it was too long. I couldn't put it all up here. So I'm just focusing on the quotes and analysis of this one. In the story, Harrison shouts and flails his hands, yelling out that he is the emperor, and when he decides to dance on stage with his empress, the music wasn't to his taste, so he snatched the two musicians from their chairs, waved them like batons as he sang the music as he watched it play. He slammed them back into their chair. Okay? First of all, this doesn't need to be quoted. Just one word by itself. You don't have to quote that. That's fine. When you have like a string of words together that you need to quote, that's what you should do. But I like though that they did start off with their own words. They explained what was happening at the time of the quote, so that was good. That's exactly what they needed to say. Okay, so for the analysis part, the author uses a simile, wave them like batons, which helps create the tone haywire, as it is absurd to see two grown men being thrown around in the air by one single person. Couple things. First of all, this is good. Here's what I would do to make it better. Because even though this is good, this person got full credit on their essay or their rewrite, there's still always room for improvement. First of all, we're not talking about similes. It technically is a simile, but that's kind of like not the point. So I would just get rid of that and say, when the author says wave them like batons, it helps create a haywire tone. So not the tone haywire, a haywire tone. So the adjective would go before the noun. So just flip-flop that. As it is absurd to see two grown men being thrown around in the air by one single person. So it was good. And if you don't know what like haywire means, if something's kind of haywire, it's like kind of crazy, zany, like kind of like wacky almost. So obviously this person like wanted to show about like how like, you know, a guy grabbing two people and shaking them. That was absurd. And they focus on single words too. So sorry, wave them like baton. So again, that's exactly what you guys need to do. Pick out pieces of your quote that you use and talk about those words. Okay? So that's what we need to be focused on. The reason I believe that the author included this tone in his story, is because he wanted to showcase just how overwhelmingly strong Harrison is, as well as to give characterization to Harrison as someone who is arrogant or bossy. And now we're going to transition to the film. Compared to the story, the film 2081 creates a tone of awe-inspiring. Again, I would just have said creates an awe-inspiring tone, but it was still a pretty good transition. In the film, Harrison announces that they shouldn't be held down by handicaps anymore. As he is talking, the audience looks up at him in an expression that seems to resemble awe. Furthermore, and again, so she's talking about how the, you're right there?
Yeah.
Okay. The student's talking about how it's an awe-inspiring tone, and she talks about how their expression, the actors, how they acted, how that created a tone of awe. What they did that. Also, the lighting seems to bring forth a feeling of transcending. I would have said a transcending feeling or a feeling of transcendence, but that's okay. Or a feeling that a new day has almost come as light surrounds Harrison, almost creating a halo effect. I almost got after this student because they didn't explain how the light was until the very end. At the end, they talked about why it created that feeling. The light surrounding Harrison creating a halo effect. If you don't know what a halo effect is, like what the angels have, like the halo around their head. This creates a tone of inspiration as everyone is staring at Harrison in amazement. My only criticism of this sentence is that at first they said it was a awe-inspiring tone, now they're saying it's inspirational. So I would just make sure to stick to like one tone word. They're used to wearing the handicaps and consider it a normal part of society. So for them to tell them that they shouldn't be forced to wear them must have come to a shock to them. I would say that this last line, probably unnecessary. Again, it's not really contributing to tone. This person got full credit though. Even though I have criticisms about it, they still did a good job talking about like what the tone was, how the author used specific words to create the tone, how the director of the movie used specific techniques within the film to do this. And by the way, this is good practice for you because we're going to be doing more film study kind of stuff in this class. Next semester, I decided, and again, you guys are very lucky to have me as your lit teacher. I'll keep reminding you about that. Next semester, we technically are supposed to read Julius Caesar, and what I've decided to do instead is we're still going to cover Julius Caesar, but we're only going to really be looking at the film version and not reading it. The reason why is because what was William Shakespeare? What did he write?
Poetry.
Well, he did write poetry. That is true. He wrote sonnets and poetry, but what is he most famous for writing?
For his plays.
Plays. Romeo and Juliet is a play, right? Plays aren't meant to be read, they're meant to be watched. So we're going to be watching the film version. We're going to study the movie, and we might actually look at a couple of different movie versions of Julius Caesar, and we're going to talk about like how they adapted the play differently. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to look at the play at all, like the reading of the original text, but we're not going to be focused primarily on that. So I want us to kind of get some practice, like with watching some film versions of things, to kind of get practice when we are ready to do that unit, so that we talk about how film works, how to like kind of study it a little bit, because it'll be just a more fun version. And I'm not gonna lie to you, we read Shakespeare last semester or last year for like 3 months. Some teachers read it for the entire second semester, and that's like too much Shakespeare, even for me. I'm an English nerd, but that's too much. But anyways, so what we're gonna be doing, as someone was pointing out, was it Josue, were you the one who was pointing it out to me or no?
Okay.
The final draft?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at the assignment, it's 2 points extra credit. I still want everybody to do it, even though it's extra credit. Basically, it's gonna create like a buffer, because I would say about 80% of you, I give B's, and I'm not gonna lie, I grade pretty hard on, I don't give out a lot of A's, and even if I do give A's, I don't always give out full credit. The reason why is because there's always something to improve, but I do give you opportunities to make up the points that you're missing. Now, I'm not gonna give you a B just because like, screw you, I'm giving you a B. It's because if you guys look at the rubric, which you guys can look at, it's on Canvas, you can see why you got the score you got. So the way it worked out, the rubric is I gave everybody, I think it was 30 points for just turning it in. If you turn in a complete draft, you got 30 of your 75 points just for turning it in. Then there was about 35 points, I think. Yeah, it was 35 points for like how well you did. So did you use appropriate evidence? Was your analysis good? Did you provide enough analysis? Was it organized well? All that comes from the 35 points. And then the last 10 points was revising, which I think most people actually did enough revision. There's very few people who didn't have, no one turned in something that was completely identical to their rough draft, which is good. Some people, I think, did the thesaurus thing a little bit, and they changed words a little bit, like in their sentence, left it basically the same, but that's okay. We'll practice on getting better at that. For your final draft, because again, something that we need to get past is that there's not always just a rough in a final draft, and usually we don't refer to it as a final draft. It'd be like your first draft, your second draft, your third draft, your 200th draft, whatever. So what I want you guys to focus on mostly is the analysis. If you think your topic sentence needs to be fixed, that's fine, you can fix that, but mostly focus on the sentences after the quotes, okay? Make sure that you're discussing how the author from Harrison Bergeron, Kurt Vonnegut, how did he look at what words did he use? So that's what you're gonna be focusing on. What specific words created a tone? Not how did the characters feel, or like how did George feel, how did Harrison feel? I don't care about that. I'm not trying to be mean, but I don't care how they feel. I cared about how did Vonnegut make you feel angry? How did he make you feel depressed? Or what words did he give that vibe off of, basically? Honestly, that's really what a better word for a tone, another word for tone would be is vibes. What vibes is the author giving off by how they're talking? So if you want to think of it that way, that's another way to look at it. But this will need to be 10% different. I'm going to give you guys about 20 minutes, 25 minutes to rework your essay a little bit. You get 10 points extra credit. So if you got like 66 points out of 75, that technically would bring you up to over 100%. So it's still going to say a B in there, but you'll get the points back that you were missing though. Questions for me? All right, so let's go ahead and just say till noon, and then we'll see where we're at from there. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, for one thing, it's supposed to be one paragraph, and you have it like separated into like a bunch of little like mini paragraphs. So I would start off by combining it, but let me see. So again, you shouldn't start off a quote with their words. You need to start off that sentence with your words to explain what's happening at that scene. So like after Harrison had, broken onto the stage, Diane Moon Lampers, the handicapper general. So just explain what's happening at that moment. Okay, so for your analysis, so you're kind of summarizing what's happening. The general shoots Harrison and the ballerina dead for trying to have a little freedom, for being handicapped. This is proof for both story. So what's the? I don't know what tone you think that the story is. Like what? Okay, so, but the hard part about that is you're gonna have to find words within those sentences that you said that show that like it creates a feeling of freedom based off the words, not the actions of the story. So how like the words that they use to describe things. I would say so, yeah. But so you could say like these words give a sense of freedom, something like that. Or you could change the tone word. Either way. I'm not gonna lie, that one might be kind of hard to find. So look at the tone wheel, look at some of the words. Yeah, don't get confused with the tone being like the subject of the play or the theme or whatever motif. You need to find a word again where you can point to some like words in a quote and say, yes, the author is creating that feeling for me because of what he said. So that's what you need to be looking for. I think you're really okay. What you got back here? I mean, you could just have it saved, but if you want to change it, you can. It won't delete the original version that you sent me. If you guys are gonna put that in charge of that, I'm gonna need to go up to that. You need changes to it? Okay, so hold on that second. Well, let's work on the code board then, try to make some improvements, okay? I didn't really do well on yours, so you can have too much visibility. For yours, I would actually say revision by deletion, so maybe like, yeah, so like look for stuff that might be unnecessary in yours. It's really one of those long things you're talking about.
In about
8-10 more minutes to try again, focus on your analysis. Start submitting it when you feel like you've made some positive changes to your writing.
As long as she comes back.
Okay, I got a few people who have submitted so far. Again, I'll give you about 5 more minutes. Try to submit if you guys can. Again, that's 10 extra points just for trying to make your writing better. We're gonna write right now. See the war and that's fine, it's delightful. The KR and that's, yeah, that's not my Yeah, no, I just, I have listened to it, it's not, I don't like actively like dislike them, but it's like, I just.
You prefer something else?
I prefer something else, but I like this, I like to down to be while neighboring is, like, I love their influence, like Armenian kind of music into the, like, kind of harder rock, which is really cool.
Okay, good. I appreciate this.
Yes, again, indifferent. I know you like, I remember your story. Again, you have to remember, I'm more of a fun guy. I like systems because they're a little more fast, you know? And I know Slip, I can be too. So, but it just, I don't know.
My first look that kind of.
Rancid, no facts, bad religion.
So just.
Yeah, I don't listen to I'm more of a 90s punk guy. But I do like some older punk also. Clash, this were good.
Say it about the
Think of oh, I saw Black Flag when they came to Fresno actually. They played at Fulton 55. Yeah. I was one of the last concerts I actually saw. With that, and I also went to do you know what ska music is? Not really ska. S-K-A. Okay. It's kind of like punk and reggae mix, kind of. So it's actually like a lot of older stuff, like even the Tosh have a lot of stuff that's more kind of like ska. It has like that upbeat, it goes like that. So I went to a ska show, also 55 actually, I think, but yeah, good times. Maybe go to a lot of shows before COVID.
So you were.
Oh yeah, 90% was
So I already think it was like, let's just say, even in kind of corporate,
how you do actually, yes.
how loud it is part of that.
My other cousin who's like super into so where he go he like them, he like held the competition. Yeah, so. Oh, it's on there too. It's on this one. It's on all of them. Again, yeah. So yeah, there's no words there. Yeah, yeah. Can I get some more people submitted in? Maybe. Okay. A couple more. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, please. So again, in your analysis, you're talking about like it shows how people would be worried or even scared. I'm not worried about how the people. It's not like how people would react. It's how you react because of the words that they use. So, what words did he use? Did the author use that made you feel worried? That's what that is. It's like again, it's whenever you hear your friend say it's not what you said, it's how you said it. That's exactly what we're looking at. So I would say your analysis needs to be more focused on the words that he used and what feeling did those words create. Okay. And what feeling did the words create? That's what you guys need to be focused on in your analysis. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop it here. Again, if you didn't turn it in, that's okay. Just make sure you turn it in later and I'll make sure to get you those points. If you're freaking out, like we'll say like, well, why is it worth 0 points? It's because it's extra credit, but you're good. That's why I put in the notes 10 points extra credit. So you do make positive changes. And even if like, I feel like maybe it wasn't super positive, as long as I see that you try to make it better, you'll get the full points for extra credit. Again, you're basically getting rewarded for trying to revise your stuff. So Alright, if I could have you get out your story from yesterday. Who needs one? Who is not here for one? Probably two. Anybody else absent yesterday who needs a copy of the story? He was just ahead.
That's more than her.
Oh, good. Never like that. All right. So you should have read up to section 2 yesterday. So first 2 pages, introduction, section 1, section 2. The introduction, even though it doesn't say it, it's just that first part by the flower. So we're gonna pick up from there. We should be about, we're at about 5 minutes and 50 seconds, so we have about 20 minutes of story left to read. What I would suggest, you're gonna have some time at the end of class still to read and highlight and underline and all that. I would suggest as we're reading though, just circle any words that you don't know. But we're gonna be starting on the 3rd page where it says section 3. We're gonna read through this and then we'll talk about it a little bit at the end.
During those first hours, Ralph Crowley exhausted all the resources of his ingenuity to rescue her. He struggled with poles and ropes, but every tug was an intolerable torture for the imprisoned girl. It occurred to him to use one of the poles as a lever, but got no result and had to abandon the idea. He talked a couple of soldiers into working with him for a while, but they had to leave because so many of the victims were calling for help. The girl could not move, she barely could breathe, but she did not seem desperate, as if an ancestral resignation allowed her to accept her fate. The reporter, on the other hand, was determined to snatch her from death. Someone brought him a tire which he placed beneath her arms like a life buoy, and then laid a plank near the hole to hold his weight and allow him to stay closer to her. As it was impossible to remove the rubble blindly, he tried once or twice to dive toward her feet, but emerged frustrated, covered with mud and spitting gravel. He concluded that he would have to have a pump to drain the water, and radioed a request for one, but received in return a message that there was no available transport, and it could not be sent until the next morning.
We can't wait that long.
Ralph Carley shouted, but in the pandemonium, no one stopped to commiserate. Many more hours would go by before he accepted that time had stagnated and reality had been irreparably distorted. The military doctor came to examine the girl and observed that her heart was functioning well and that if she did not get too cold, she could survive the night.
Hang on, Azucena. We'll have the pump tomorrow.
Ralph Carley tried to console her. Don't leave me alone, she begged.
No, of course I won't leave you.
Someone brought him coffee and he helped the girl drink it sip by sip. The warm liquid revived her, and she began telling him about her small life, about her family and her school, about how things were in that little bit of world before the volcano had erupted. She was 13, and she had never been outside her village. Ralph Carley, buoyed by a premature optimism, was convinced that everything would end well. The pump would arrive, they would drain the water, move the rubble, and Azucena would be transported by helicopter to a hospital where she would recover rapidly and where he could visit her and bring her gifts. He thought, she's already too old for dolls, and I don't know what would please her, maybe a dress. I don't know much about women, he concluded, amused, reflecting that although he had known many women in his lifetime, none had taught him these details. To pass the hours, he began to tell Azucena about his travels and adventures as a news hound. And when he exhausted his memory, imagination, inventing things he thought might entertain her. From time to time she dozed, but he kept talking in the darkness to assure her that he was still there and to overcome the menace of uncertainty. That was a long night. Many miles away, I watched Ralph Carley and the girl on the television screen. I could not bear the wait at home, so I went to national television, where I often spent entire nights with Ralph editing programs. There, I was near his world, and I could at least get a feeling of what he lived through during those 3 decisive days. I called all the important people in the city, senators, commanders of the armed forces, the North American ambassador, and the president of National Petroleum, begging them for a pump to remove the silt, but obtained only vague promises. I began to ask for urgent help on radio and television to see if there wasn't someone who could help us. Between calls, I would run to the newsroom to monitor the satellite transmissions that periodically brought new details of the catastrophe. While reporters selected scenes with the most impact for the news report, I searched for footage that featured Azucena's mud pit. The screen reduced the disaster to a single plane and accentuated the tremendous distance that separated me from Ralph Carley. Nonetheless, I was there with him. The child's every suffering hurt me as it did him. I felt his frustration, his impotence. Faced with the impossibility of communicating with him, the fantastic idea came to me that if I tried, I could reach him by force of mind and in that way give him encouragement. I concentrated until I was dizzy, a frenzied and futile activity. At times I would be overcome with compassion and burst out crying. At other times I was so drained, I felt as if I were staring through a telescope at the light of a star, dead for 1,000,000 years. I watched that hell on the first morning broadcast. Cadavers of people and animals awash in the current of new rivers formed overnight from the melted snow. Above the mud rose the tops of trees and the bell towers of a church where several people had taken refuge and were patiently awaiting rescue teams. Hundreds of soldiers and volunteers from the civil defense were clawing through rubble, searching for survivors, while long rows of ragged specters awaited their turn for a cup of hot broth. Radio networks announced that their phones were jammed with calls from families offering shelter to orphaned children. Drinking water was in scarce supply along with gasoline and food. Doctors resigned to amputating arms and legs without anesthesia, but at least they be sent serum and painkillers and antibiotics. Most of the roads, however, were impassable, and worse were the bureaucratic obstacles that stood in the way. To top it all, the clay contaminated by decomposing bodies threatened the living with an outbreak of epidemics. Azucena was shivering inside the tire that held her above the surface. Mobility and tension had greatly weakened her, but she was conscious and could still be heard when a microphone was held out to her. Her tone was humble, as if apologizing for all the fuss. Ralph Carley had a growth of beard and dark circles beneath his eyes. He looked near exhaustion. Even from that enormous distance, I could sense the quality of his weariness, so different from the fatigue of other adventures. He had completely forgotten the camera. He could not look at the girl through a lens any longer. The pictures we were receiving were not his assistants, but those of other reporters who had appropriated Azucena, bestowing on her the pathetic responsibility of embodying the horror of what had happened in that place. With the first light, Rolf tried again to dislodge the obstacles that held the girl in her tomb, but he had only his hands to work with. He did not dare use a tool for fear of injuring her. He fed Azucena a cup of the cornmeal mush and bananas the army was distributing, but she immediately vomited it up. The doctor stated that she had a fever, but added that there was little he could do. Antibiotics were being reserved for cases of gangrene. A priest also passed by and blessed her, hanging a medal of the Virgin around her neck. By evening, the gentle, persistent drizzle began to fall. The sky is weeping, as the sun murmured, and she too began to cry.
Don't be afraid.
Rolf begged.
You have to keep your strength up and be calm. Everything will be fine. I'm with you, and I'll get you out somehow.
Reporters returned to photograph Azucena and asked her the same questions, but she no longer tried to answer. In the meanwhile, more television and movie teams arrived with their spools of cable, tapes, film, videos, precision lenses, recorders, sound consoles, lights, reflecting screens, auxiliary motors, cargo supplies, electricians, sound technicians, and cameramen. Azucena's face was beamed to millions of screens around the world. and all the while Rolf Carly kept pleading for a pump. The improved technical facilities bore results, and national television began receiving sharper pictures and clearer sound. The distance seemed suddenly compressed, and I had the horrible sensation that Azucena and Rolf were by my side, separated from me by impenetrable glass. I was able to follow events hour by hour and knew everything my love did to rescue the girl from her prison and help her endure her suffering. I overheard fragments of what they said to one another and could guess the rest. I was present when she taught Rolf to pray, and when he distracted her with the stories I had told him in 1,001 nights beneath the white mosquito netting of our bed. When darkness came on the second day, Rolf tried to sing Azucena to sleep with old Austrian folk songs he had learned from his mother, but she was far beyond sleep. They spent most of the night talking, each in a stupor of exhaustion and hunger and shaking with cold. That night, imperceptibly, the unyielding floodgates that had contained Rolf Carly's past for so many years began to open, and the torrent of all that had lain hidden in the deepest and most secret layers of memory poured out, leveling before it the obstacles that had blocked his consciousness for so long. He could not tell it all to Azucena. She perhaps did not know there was a world beyond the sea or time previous to her own. She was not capable of imagining Europe in the years of the war. So he could not tell her of defeat, nor of the afternoon the Russians had led them to the concentration camp to bury prisoners dead from starvation. Why should he describe to her how the naked bodies piled like a mountain of firewood resembled fragile china? How could he tell this dying child about ovens and gallows? Nor did he mention the night that he had seen his mother naked, shod in stiletto-heeled red boots, sobbing with humiliation. There was much he did not tell, but in those hours he relived for the first time all the things his mind had tried to erase. Azucena had surrendered her fear to him, and so, without wishing it, had obliged Rolf to confront his own. There, beside that hellhole of mud, it was impossible for Rolf to flee from himself any longer, and the visceral terror he had lived as a boy suddenly invaded him. He reverted to the years when he was the age of Azucena and younger, and like her found himself trapped in a pit without escape, buried in life, his head barely above ground. He saw before his eyes the boots and legs of his father, who had removed his belt and was whipping it in the air with the never-forgotten hiss of a viper coiled to strike. Sorrow flooded through him, intact and precise, as if it had lain always in his mind, waiting. He was once again in the armoire, where his father locked him to punish him for imagining his behavior. There, with eternal hours, he crouched with eyes closed, not to see the darkness, with his hands over his ears to shut out the beating of his heart trembling, huddled like a cornered animal. Wandering in the midst of his memories, he found his sister, Katharina, a sweet, retarded child who spent her life hiding with the hope that her father would forget the disgrace of her having been born. With Katharina, Rolf crawled beneath the dining room table, and with her hid there under the round white tablecloth. Two children, forever embraced, alert to footsteps and voices. Katharina's scent melted with his own sweat, with aromas of cooking, garlic, soup, freshly baked bread, and the unexpected odor of putrescent clay. His sister's hand in his, her frightened breathing, her silk hair against his cheek, the candid gaze of her eyes. Katharina materialized before him, floating on the air like a flag, clothed in the white tablecloth, now a white sheet. And at last, he could weep for her death and for the guilt of having abandoned her. He understood then that all his exploits as a reporter, the feats that had won him such recognition and fame, were merely an attempt to keep his most ancient fears at bay, a stratagem for taking refuge behind a lens to test whether reality was more tolerable from that perspective. He took excessive risks as an exercise of courage, training by day to conquer the monsters that tormented him by night. But he had come face to face with the moment of truth. He could not continue to escape his past. He was Azucena. He was buried in the clayey mud. His terror was not the distant emotion of an almost forgotten childhood. It was a claw sunk through his throat. In the flush of his tears, he saw his mother, dressed in black and clutching her imitation crocodile pocketbook to her bosom, just as he had last seen her on the dock when she had come to put him on the boat to South America. She had not come to dry his tears, to tell him to pick up a shovel. The war was over, and now they must bury the dead. Don't cry. I don't hurt anymore. I'm fine, Azucena said when dawn came.
I'm not crying for you.
Ralph Carlyle smiled.
I'm crying for myself. I hurt all over.
The third day in the valley of the cataclysm began with a pale light filtering through storm clouds. The President of the Republic visited the area in his tailored safari jacket to confirm that this was the worst catastrophe of the century. The country was in mourning. Sister nations had offered aid. He had ordered a state of siege. The armed forces would be merciless. Anyone caught stealing or committing other offenses would be shot on sight. He added that it was impossible to remove all the corpses or count thousands who had disappeared. The entire valley would be declared holy ground, and bishops would come to celebrate a solemn mass for the souls of the victims. He went to the army field tents to offer relief in the form of vague promises to crowds of the rescued, then to the improvised hospital to offer a word of encouragement to doctors and nurses, worn down from so many hours of tribulations. Then he asked to be taken to see Azucena, the little girl the whole world had seen. He waved to her with a limp statesman's hand, and microphones recorded his emotional voice in her tone as he told her that her courage had served as an example to the nation. Ralph Carlyle interrupted to ask for a pump, and the president assured him that he personally would attend to the matter. I caught a glimpse of Ralph for a few seconds, kneeling beside the lead pit. On the evening news broadcast, he was still in the same position, and I, glued to the screen like a fortune teller from a crystal ball, could tell that something fundamental had changed in him. I knew somehow that during the night his defenses had crumbled and he had given in to grief. Finally, he was vulnerable. The girl had touched a part of him that he himself had no access to, a part he had never shared with me. Rolf had wanted to console her, but it was Azucena who had given him consolation. I recognized the precise moment at which Rolf gave up the fight and surrendered to the torture of watching the girl die. I was with them 3 days and 2 nights, spying on them from the other side of life. I was there when she told him that in all her 13 years, no boy had ever loved her, and that it was a pity to leave this world without knowing love. Rolf assured her that he loved her more than he could ever love anyone, more than he loved his mother, more than his sister, more than all the women who had slept in his arms, more than he loved me, his life companion. He would have given anything to be trapped in that well in her place, who would have exchanged her life for Azucena's. And I watched as he leaned down to kiss her poor forehead, consumed by a sweet, sad emotion he could not name. I felt how in that instant both were saved from despair, how they were freed from the clay, how they rose above the vultures and helicopters, how together they flew above the vast swamp of corruption and romance. How finally they were able to accept. Ralph Carlyle prayed in silence that she would die quickly, because such pain cannot be borne. By then I had obtained a pump and was in touch with the general, who had agreed to ship it the next morning on a military cargo plane. But on the night of that third day, beneath the unblinking focus of quartz lamps and the lens of 100 cameras, Azucena gave up. Her eyes locked with those of a friend who had sustained her to the end. Rolf Carlyle removed the life buoy, closed her eyelids, held her to his chest for a few moments, and then let her go. She sank slowly, flower in the mud. You are back with me, but you are not the same man. I often accompany you to the station and we watch the videos of Azucena again. You study them intently, looking for something you could have done to save her, something you did not think of in time. Or maybe you study them to see yourself as if in a mirror, naked. Your cameras lie forgotten in a closet. You do not write or sing, you sit long hours before the window staring at the mountains. Beside you, I wait, for you to complete the voyage into yourself, for the old wounds to heal. I know that when you return from your nightmares, we shall again walk hand in hand as before.
Alright, so let's go ahead and let's talk about Charles Carley, because again, a lot of our focus is on transformation. So he's the character who really is transformed the most in this. So let's talk about him and kind of like just different like facts about him, things that we learned about him from beginning to end. So I put up one example is that he hid behind his lens for a long time. He used it as a way to separate himself from reality, right? Rather than dealing with the situation, it was easier for him to look through a lens and kind of, again, just like keep himself separate from what was actually going on. What were some other things that we learned about him?
We learned that he had his childhood traumatized him.
Okay. And someone else, give me an example of how he was traumatized. What were some of the ways that like they described like what did he go through?
Oh,
I think somebody else there. Come on now, give other people an
I
opportunity.
just have another one to add to the line.
Oh, okay, where?
If nothing could shake his like curiosity and detours. Well, probably his curiosity. Like nothing could shake it.
Okay,
That
so
would be in the beginning.
yeah, so that would be towards here more. So he was always curious. I'm just kind of trying to write it smaller so I could fit it in. Yeah, he was curious, so that's how he was at the beginning. Probably what led him to become a journalist, right? You know, journalists want to travel the world, they want to learn more about different things. So yeah, he was curious. I want to make sure that we're exploring this part too, though, the trauma as a child. So what were some examples of childhood trauma that he endured?
Seeing his mom naked.
Okay. And yes, well, that can be traumatic for everyone, you know. It was a little bit more than that. So it doesn't outright say, but what do you think was hinted at? What?
Like she got sent to a camp.
The concentration camps? Okay, so that could have been part of it too. So he does mention the concentration camps.
The mom could have been a prostitute.
Yeah, and that was something that a lot of people tend to think. Okay, also, she might also have had issues with who?
Oh, the husband.
Right, yeah, so like. So we don't know for sure, but it kind of hints that like there might have been some trouble there. Speaking of dad, what was his relationship like with him? Maybe somebody I haven't heard from. Madison, go ahead.
It says how his father locked him like to punish him for like misbehavior, and how he like pictured like when he would see his dad's like boots like when they were under the table,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like waving the belt around, I guess.
So
Kind of like
him,
he was like abusive.
from him, abuse. What about his sister? Yes, and thank you for using, I know they didn't use the politically correct term in it, but yeah, so like, I would say something like mentally challenged, and she ended up dying too. In some cultures, frankly, even this culture, obviously there's stigmas against people who are mentally challenged, you know. We tend to have a feeling that like, oh, it's inferior or something. And obviously some people can be abusive towards mentally challenged people. Obviously the dad was just abusive in general, but he had a lot of trauma as a child, which, you know, people who suffer from trauma, and I'm not saying people who have hobbies, like all people with hobbies have a trauma, but sometimes people can use those hobbies, you know, it could be watching, it could be, you know, video games, it could be movies, it could be camera, it could be art, it could be reading. Sometimes people can use it as an escape, and based off of what the narrator said, who is his girlfriend, he obviously like does do that. He does hide behind the camera as a way to like not deal with what's really going on with him. Okay, so let's go a little further into the story now. So yes, he had a traumatic childhood. How is his experience with Azucena? Like, how does he start to change?
You can't watch her through the lens anymore.
Okay, so he doesn't watch her, he sets his camera aside, so doesn't. And I'm sorry about my crappy handwriting, so. Okay, doesn't hide behind lens. Okay, what else? Nathan?
He's more vulnerable.
He's more vulnerable, that's a good word. So he's willing to like kind of like share his emotions now, and he's not afraid to like, you know, be that kind of like macho kind of character that like doesn't have emotions and stuff like that. If you look at the last paragraph too, like she also, or not the last, well, it might have been the last paragraph, let me see. Yeah, the last paragraph. What doesn't he do anymore?
He doesn't hide behind his ears, or
Well, yeah, we kind of got that part of it. Like, he doesn't like write or sing anymore. Right, or sing. So he's not doing things that are making him happy, but she does have faith in him that, like, if you look at the last line of it, or the last sentence, not the last line, but I know that when you return from your nightmare, we shall again walk hand in hand as before. So right now, he's just basically going through stuff. It's like a lifetime of trauma and like bad things that have happened to him. He's kind of like pushed him in the back of his mind, and dealing with Azucena's death has kind of forced him to like revisit those things. And now he's just basically kind of like in a dark place. So he's not doing the things that made him happy anymore. He's not doing any of that. So he's basically just like kind of mentally and emotionally kind of like in a way shut down, but at the same time in a way he's actually being more honest, right? He's being more real about his feelings, and he's not putting on a show anymore. So that's kind of like where we're at on that. So I know we only have about like 8 minutes, but I still would like you guys to get started on this, even if you get through like a page or two. The annotations need to be done for tomorrow night before you guys come in on Friday. So get as much done as you guys can. Again, you've already read it, so you don't need to like reread it all. But just like look for parts where it has the feelings. Those are the most important. Boxes around any time they describe the characters. Highlighting anything that could be important. And don't forget like a 1-sentence summary about what happened on that page.
All right, you guys go ahead and pack up. I have a very important announcement though. Today is National Coffee Day. So if you bring a reusable cup to Starbucks, they will give you free coffee. Yeah. But that doesn't mean like lattes or macchiatos or whatever. It's coffee, normal coffee, but they'll ask for your sugar. But yeah, free coffee. I suggest you do it, especially if you need that extra pick me up in the afternoon. Yeah, today. Very important information.